me today to speak. As we heard, I'm Eilleen Buckley, the Executive Director of Long Island Advocacy Center. LIAC is a nonprofit that's dedicated to protecting the legal rights of students and people with disabilities. We seek to empower parents and students to understand and navigate the complexities of the education laws so that students can get the services to which they are entitled. We work to prevent some of the tragedies that Dr. Jones spoke about this morning. Unfortunately, we are not seeing those initiatives throughout Long Island, and we're not seeing them reach our children. I believe, and all our staff, we have almost 2 tables of staff here today, we believe that all students can learn, but maybe not in the same way on the same day. And the law requires that students with differing needs get their needs met, whether it be academic, social, emotional, or physical. I've worked at LIAC as a staff attorney, a supervising attorney, and now the executive director for 16 years. At LIAC, I've worked primarily with at-risk youth struggling to succeed at school. This work is a passion for me, and through the years, I've had the privilege of speaking with many students who are struggling at school, whether it be because they are school avoidant, incorrectly classified, undiagnosed, acting out, suffering from trauma, English language learners, LGBTQ, transgendered, or experiencing some form of bullying, racism, or simply not understood at school. When we ask these kids tell us uniformly that they wish they could succeed at school. They don't understand the complex reasons why they are struggling or how to remedy them. Since the pandemic, we have seen a huge increase in the number of students struggling at school. Students have struggled to return to in-person schooling. While the pandemic has impacted the education of all students, the greatest impact has been on students who live in low-income communities, are English language learners, are at risk for entering or are involved in the juvenile justice or the child welfare systems, and those who have disabilities. These student groups consistently have the lowest graduation rates in schools across Long Island. The pandemic did not create the disparities, but it certainly has exacerbated them. It has been well documented that these students have been struggling with increased mental health needs. On January 7, 2022, NPR reported that schools are seeing elevated levels of stress, anxiety, and different behavioral issues in students, and that schools across the country are overwhelmed with K-12 students struggling with mental health problems. They also reported that stressed out kids are hurting each other and themselves, resulting in increased fighting in school. On January 4th, 2022, the Newsday reported high student absent rates, with some districts reporting that 20% of their students were not attending school. In the last 2 years, LIAC saw student suspensions increase as students tried to navigate the return to in-person learning and found that they were ill-equipped after being home for so long. The increased occurrence of anxiety, depression, school avoidance, and trauma resulted in increased occurrence of bullying, aggression, and out-of-school suspensions. Children as young as 5 years old were facing long out-of-school suspensions in higher numbers. LIAC saw an increase in the length of proposed out-of-school suspensions, as well as a decrease in the ages of those being suspended. Prior to the pandemic, we as advocates had seen some movement towards moving away from zero-tolerance policies, which was supported by evidence-based research. And we were trying, and some schools were moving towards more restorative justice practices. Since the pandemic, however, we're seeing a return to zero tolerance. Schools struggling to staff programs and services have been unable to provide the services to which students are legally entitled. Community programs also struggle to staff their programs, resulting in a lack of needed services outside of school. LIAC attorneys represent families in disciplinary hearings when students are facing long-term or longer than 10 days out-of-school suspensions. While the law requires schools to provide additional services to students who struggle with behaviors to prevent the reoccurrence of the troubling behaviors, too often we see the focus on punishment. As their advocates, we seek to compel the district to understand the behaviors and the functions they are serving. All behavior is communication, and kids who act out in school do so to have a need met. The trick is in understanding the unmet needs and providing interventions to meet those needs in an appropriate way. Sometimes kids don't have the skills they need to deal with the issues they face. Those skills need to be taught proactively and if the behavior is to subside. None of this is achieved through exclusionary discipline. In my experience, an out-of-school suspension is not a deterrent and does not prevent the reoccurrence of the behaviors. After an out-of-school suspension, students return more disengaged and isolated, more frustrated and angry. Moreover, some behaviors are symptoms of emerging mental illness and need appropriate evaluations and interventions. It's necessary to know this in order to address the issues appropriately. As you can see, there's much to be done, and we've heard a lot about this today, and we must take steps to turn this around. I'm not an expert by any means, but my experience has shown me that most of the kids I've spoken to who were struggling did not feel engaged, had no one in their schools that they trusted or felt comfortable talking to. As part of my work, I always encourage kids to create a relationship with an adult in school. It is said that one caring adult can change a kid's life. I believe this to be true. In addition, I compel parents and professionals to act early and address issues before they become major. Don't take a wait-and-see approach when you see a child struggling. It is my hope that our children will learn how to maintain mental wellness both in and out of school, and that all children will get the support they need.